Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspirational show coming right up. Our first guest is Vicki Ward, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, Supercharge Your Life After 60. So let's welcome to the show, Vicki.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, I am so delighted we're spending this time together and talking about your brand new book. I mean, my goodness, I think it's something that a lot of people can really use right now.
Well, it's something that I'm very proud of because it's important as we move through these different life changes, as we go from one age to another. There are important milestones in our lives, and it's important that we recognize that we're not alone, that, some people are going through, they're looking at retirement, they're looking at downsizing their homes, they're looking at making sure that they have their wills and their trusts together. These are some of the things that other people in my age group are looking to do, or things that I've already done, so I recognize the need for it, and it was important. The more I talked to people, the more I saw that they either did or did not have these things in order, and so it was important to put it together in the book.
Well, you did a beautiful job with that, and it gives a lot of great information, but I have to ask you, what started you on this path? Because, this isn't your first book. You've written several others. What started you on this path of writing?
The path started actually when I was in high school, and I have to tell you a little story. It was so exciting to get the praise from English teachers and other teachers at how I wrote. It didn't matter what it was that I was writing on, but I had an opportunity to amplify it in my own voice that I didn't know I had. And so once having understood that, it was easy to get lost in my writing. And I've always had good penmanship, and I've always been an avid speller. And so it kind of knitted itself together and just created this writer in me. I didn't fully develop it at that time, but that's when the spark came.
Well, I love the cover. We're going to start with this part. I love the cover of your new book, Supercharge Your Life After 60, because you guys are all sassy as get out in front of the Golden Gate Bridge on your Harleys.
And that is the image. That's something that I've worked on with all of my books. I really want to capture the spirit of the book, but I also want to grab readers quickly. Mm-hmm. And when anyone sees the cover of this new book, they're 5 women over 65 years old riding underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, famous in San Francisco, California. And it's so life-affirming because when you think of women 65 and over, most people think that they're taking care of grandkids, that they're walking slowly, and they're in your way when you want to go through the grocery store, and they're driving like Miss Daisy. And so when they see this, it immediately puts into mind, oh, these ladies they've got it going on. They've got something that I didn't expect. That could be my mama doing that kind of thing. And it captures people instantly. So, yes, I love this cover.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And it really says a lot about you. And gosh, kudos to you because, you're right. A lot of times when people have in their mind the idea of a woman or even a man over 60, they kind of expect that. They expect someone to be at home knitting doilies or something.
Absolutely.
And that's so far from the truth,
And these are different times for us. I was a baby. I was a child of the 60s, as it were. And we were dynamic in making a lot of changes across the world, across the country, as far as women's rights, as far as rights for disenfranchised individuals. And so there's a whole world full of people that same age who are now crossing that 65 area, and they are doing different things in their lives. They're not doing the things that their parents did. They still want to stay active. They still want to be vital. They want to continue to use their brains. They are starting new businesses. They're doing things that were totally unexpected of people 65 and older years ago. It's a whole game changer. Mm-hmm.
Well, especially if I remember the last stats, I think it's every day 10,000 baby boomers turn the age of 65.
Yes. Absolutely.
So we're looking at a huge, populace that, has a whole new start on life. It's like you get to start over.
Actually. You just reset the timer, and you can do anything you want. Because the way I looked at it, this is the first time after 65, and when you retire, generally is the first time since kindergarten that you weren't told to get up and go somewhere. At kindergarten, you start school. When you get out of high school, then your parents expect you to get a job or to go to college. And so you continue to work, you continue to have families, and then you have to work because they have to eat, they have to live. So the cycle continues. And so this is one of the first times in life that you actually have the opportunity to get up and do what you want to do. So it's liberating. It's liberating because you can choose this path to be completely different from any other path you ever took in life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I can see that's why you start off your first tip, your first chapter with it's time to change your thinking. Because you get to redesign what your life is going to look like, and it isn't set up by what people are expecting of people who, have reached the age of 60 and beyond,
Absolutely. And that's the thing that makes me so excited about this because when we talk about it's your new lifestyle, you have an opportunity to be the architect for however this looks. Now, of course, financial considerations must be included, physical health, mental health, all of those have to be included also. And if we read the information that's available about maintaining your health, maintaining your mental health, maintaining your emotional health, then you have an opportunity to act on some of these new ideas. But if you're not taking care of your body, and we've got some information about the right things to do regarding food lists, the right foods to eat, superfoods for your brain and for your bones and all of that. I've got a lot of that included. But again, if you're not doing some of those things to maintain this aging body, then you won't have the opportunity to excite yourself with the new things that you can become involved with.
Yeah. It changes everything. And and the thing is there's so many options available today than there were even like 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. It's a whole new world. With the advent of so many electronic devices, there's nothing that you cannot do from your home. There's nothing that you cannot get involved in. There's not a region in the world that you cannot learn more about. So we're in a country and in a world that is swarming with opportunities for new insight, to start whole new careers, to take what you used to do as a hobby and turn it into a new business simply because it doesn't have to make that much money if you can support it. But if you do need more money to support your retirement goals and your retirement lifestyle, again, this is the opportunity that you may have been wanting for a long time.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier before we kind of got started here, and I know one of the things that your book brought up that I felt was so important, not just to people over the age of 60, but to pretty much any generation, is when we start to talk about when people feel lonely or alone, because I think that's like one of the number one causes of depression. And don't quote me on that. I know I've seen a report not long ago, some research that was done that contributed loneliness to depression, and it was kind of like this ongoing circle. And so it's really, I felt that your insights on this were so important when it comes to the topic of loneliness.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because let me mention that I had the absolute wonderful opportunity to actually talk with Dr. Daniel Russell, who's made many important contributions in the areas of measurement and research methodology. He was one of the developers of the UCLA Loneliness Scale and Social Provisions Scale. And it's a long title, but it's important because he gave me permission to include this loneliness scale in my book. And But because one of the things that when we're opening it up, it says this may come as a surprise, but loneliness is believed to be rising around the world and could have a significant effect on your health. And so in looking at the loneliness scale, it's asking about how often do you feel unhappy doing so many things alone? How often do you feel you have no one to talk to? There are 10 questions to this scale, and they give you a scoring. If a total score is computed by adding up the response to each question. The average loneliness score on the measure is 20. A score of 25 or higher reflects a higher level of loneliness. And one of the definitions of loneliness is not necessarily being just alone. It's not feeling connected to others. It's when you move to a new town and you're not connected with other people. It's when you are in a room full of people, but you're not connected socially to that group of people. There are lots of reasons how loneliness comes into play, and one of the big things for people 65 and older who have retired, you may have been known as Sally, an HR, or Jim down in publishing, but now you're just Sally at home. You're now just Jim at home. You no longer have that name and that title behind it, and as a result, you lose some of that. That was a part of your identity, and everyone can recognize that from being at work and being a part of a unit in that working situation. And so it's the same happens when you retire. You no longer have that opportunity to be connected. So who am I? So you begin to redefine who you are. And at that time, you also have the opportunity to recognize where I am now. Okay, I've got more time on my hands. A lot of people are still working. Some are retired. How do I now reallocate the time that I have in my life so that I do not feel this overwhelming sense of being alone?
There's so many people that are going through that regardless what age. And it's
Absolutely.
Such timeless advice to help people kind of look at this and go, how can I reconnect? Because it does take some effort to put yourself out there, but it's okay. I mean, because there are groups, there are all sorts of different places to connect with people. It could be like a book club, it could be volunteering at something, all sorts of things.
Absolutely, and that's some of the things that I've included in the book too. It's just putting yourself where people are, and it's kind of right here. It says you got to get the old butt up off the couch and hook up with people. Friends will help you with that. They will call you, they will remind you, bore you, pester you until you get up and get involved. And once you do, you'll find that you want to keep on getting up and staying involved because it keeps you feeling alive, younger, and healthy. And so that's the important thing to do, recognizing that you're feeling this loneliness, and then you must take the initiative to find a way to connect with someone else, connect with that someone who will be there for you, who will be the person to cajole you out of the house and out of the space that you're in. And there's trial and error involved, but it's guaranteed that if you care enough about yourself, if you do an assessment, recognize where you are. If you take this exam and look at what your score is, and you find yourself below the score that is acceptable, then you recognize that you've reached a place in your life, and it might have been, again, leaving a job, death of a spouse, moving to a new area. So many reasons why loneliness can occur, but there are also as many reasons and ways to suggest that you can overcome it.
Yeah, or it could just be that someone's isolating themselves because,
that's it.
Like how you're saying, like, gosh, I'm no longer at my job being Susie in payroll, so who am I? I'm just going to stay at home, and not do not interact. And there's a whole world out there of people that not only need help and to connect with other people, but really want it too. Absolutely.
I've actually lived a lot of this myself, and I didn't realize it. I have been a very social person all my life, and once I had the wonderful opportunity to retire, then and sit down and write my books, my beloved books that I wanted to write, then I started feeling this loneliness, and I couldn't understand. I retired as a Superior Court Administrator. So that was 34 years, of me working for the court system and being in charge of something or someone or some groups of people. So there was a strong identity there for me to come home and no longer have to report to an office, but walk down the hallway to my private office and write. I began to feel some of the things, and that's why some of the things that I've written about, and which is why I actually studied it, wanted it to be a part of this book, but not recognizing that I would also speak to someone who actually created the gold standard for a scale for determining loneliness. So I went through my own little steps and knew that I needed to reconnect with some people that I worked with. I knew that I needed to get out of the house. I might love writing, but yes, I could do it all day, but I didn't need to do it alone all day. So yes, I took the advice before I wrote it in this book. Some years ago, I took the advice and spoke to different people, and they would say, "Oh, come on, I'm retired too. Let's go have lunch, or meet somebody down at the job for lunch, or just different ways to maintain your active interaction with people."
Mm-hmm. And still have that level of connectedness.
Absolutely.
And my goodness, your book it's just a wealth of information. And there are many other topics that you talk about, and we are not, of course, going to cover them all because, everyone needs to go out and get their own copy of Supercharge.
I love that. Absolutely.
But there's one chapter, I think it was tip 9. Yeah, it's tip 9 on maintaining, life balance, tips on maintaining life balance. And I'd love for you to share some of those with us, because the thing is that a lot of times, especially when we're kind of getting back into our own swing, because you're right. I mean, we're not in the swing of an employer. We're not having to do the 9 to 5, because our life is in a different direction. At the time that we pass 60 usually. So what are some tips that we can try to maintain that life balance?
What I've included in the book are some tips that people can kind of take to heart that, no one likes change is difficult for everyone. And depending on what the change involves, it's easier to digest than others. But this is a different season in life for individuals who are aging, and maintaining life balance is so important because from that, in the dynamic decade from 60 to 70, more things will occur in your life in that 10-year span than in many people's lives. You will retire possibly. You will start drawing retirement. You may have financial changes. You may have to sign up for Medicare. You've got aging bodies. You've got other health challenges. You're trying to create new life goals. So at that point in life, there's a balance that you have to strike. We want balance always, but at this particular time, it's really, really important because you have so many things hitting you all at once, and it's about designing a fitness plan that'll stick for you. You gotta get your butt up. You gotta get out there and exercise. And most people cannot stand to exercise. And if you don't, your body will sit there and it will do nothing and you'll pay for it. And so it's important that you find a fitness that you can do. If it's walking in your neighborhood, if it's going to the gym and doing water aerobics, if it's going to buying some videos and you're doing exercises to the videos. Mm-hmm. There are exercises online that you can do according to age, according to your physical abilities, and so no one has to worry about that. You have to create a financial plan with some fun in it. Yes, many people did not necessarily save enough money or have enough invested, or and may have to downsize, may have to not have as many dinners out as they used to. There's some things, but you've got to have a financial plan that's got some fun in it, because life should not just be, this point in your life should not just be about paying the bills, maintaining, paying the bills, maintaining. You have to commit to some creative, healthy living, healthy eating. again, with fun in it. And fun does not always include, if you're not a chef or love cooking, it does not always mean cooking that one meal at home every night for yourself. It might be you have your meal at home and you go out and have a dessert at a local restaurant. It might be that you partner up with other people and you cook at each other's houses every other day or, twice a week, and everyone is bringing something. It could be as simple as that. You have to have an activity plan. An activity plan that's going to include perhaps part-time work, volunteering, becoming a tourist in your own town. There's things that you don't know about your town that visitors come to see, and you just know very little about it. Well, that might be something that you want to do. You might want to become a volunteer. You might want to work at the school, at the local elementary school, as an assistant to the teacher. There are so many things that you can do to maintain your balance, but you got to hang out with your friends too. You got to, so putting all of these things together, you can live a pretty busy and satisfied life by including it, because it has that balance. It has the balance when you've lost people in your life. You've lost people due to divorce. You lost people due to death, and that is an emotional tightrope that we all walk at times. And so when you're going through that, or when someone else is going through it, you can be there for them. You can just grab them and say, come on, let's go and have lunch. You don't have to say how you're doing today as much as them seeing you in their presence and them taking them out of themselves, out of the personal grief that they may be going through. So balance is really more important in a person after 65 than it is for young. It's always important that every life should have a balance, but it's even more important because you want to have that opportunity to to continue to be engaged with people and not be in the corner by yourself with your own thoughts, and they keep repeating themselves to you.
Yeah. And it's just so important to have that interaction with other people regardless,
Absolutely.
We learn so much more when we're, working with people together, whether we're involved in nonprofits or maybe it's a part-time job or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. But having that interaction is always so important.
It is. It really, really is. And again, and that's another reason why I've included that in the book, because many of the things that are included are some that I have gone through or personal friends have gone through. And so I recognize it's important. I recognize the importance of mentioning it at this stage in life. Some of these things have occurred, throughout life, from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Of course, things will happen in your life, the good and the sad. But at this particular juncture, more of these things will occur, and it was important that they be included so people won't think that it's just them. I'm the only one. I don't want to talk about it to anyone because they'll think something of me and those kinds of things. But when you really read it, you recognize we're all going through similar events.
Yeah, what I found is interesting is when we do have the opportunity to boldly share, it's interesting how many people are going through the same thing. And you'll get people afterwards that will come to you. I'm sure you get a lot of this with your book where people come to you and go, you know what, I'm feeling this, or I'm going through this, or this is happening to me right now, and and this helps so much.
You're absolutely right. That's what I found in several of my other books. I did surveys of women in several of the other books that I've written, and that's the thing that I find very exciting and enlightening, because we all go through similar events, but yet when we don't hear someone speaking about it, we think, well, I'll just keep this to myself. I have to be the only one. There's a couple others, but they're probably few. And when we open those floodgates, all of a sudden we recognize just how we all are as humans. We experience many of the same things, and we just want to be private, and we don't want to seem like we're crying on someone's shoulder, but yet we're here. We are the community for each other. Mm-hmm. We support each other. We go through similar life events on a regular basis, and this is just another opportunity to see, it's not just for me. In the instance, one of the sections that I've got in here on health, about maintaining your health, and I talk about prostate cancer, because a lot of women will read this book And they will urge their male counterpart to go and get tested. They will urge and they will prompt him. They will tell him. They will demand. They will make the appointments because men are less likely to go to check on their health. And so, again, it's, so many other people may be going through it. But when you have that woman in your life that is, behind you and she's saying, yeah, you're right. And then this woman will tell her sister friend and another sister friend and a guy over here and then soon we have more people actively participating in preventive health. So it's just taking the community of life and letting it soak in where it is, where you are in that life.
When you were doing your research for your book and pulling together all the stories, your stories, and people that you know of and things that showed up, it's like, gosh, this is really important. I need to add this. Were there like one or two things that really stuck out? Like, gosh, I can't believe that this isn't being talked about more. Like how we're talking about the prostate health.
The loneliness was one of the first things. That was one of the biggest things that really surprised me. When I read that in the UK they actually have a division, like in the United States we have the Division of Labor, a government entity. Well, they have a division of loneliness that they created because it is so perverse, so pervasive in communities all over. So that was one of the things.
My goodness.
And so I didn't know about that. So that was interesting. Let me see. Life planning was another something, the essential life planning about having a will, a durable power of attorney, living trust. Those were things that caught my eye again because so many people over the years, they say, I don't want to talk about a will. I don't want to talk about a will. Yeah, okay, I'll get something together. But yet most of us know someone or a family who has been touched by a death of a parent. And the siblings have been left to make the decisions about property, dividing property and assets, etc., only to find out that one sibling believed it should go one way and the other siblings do not agree. And that has split families.
That way.
It does. It really does. And so it was really important. It was really, really important for me to have an estate planner write the section in my book. He actually wrote about estate planning. He wrote about wills. He wrote about having a living trust, durable power of attorney, long-term care insurance. All of that information was something that became important to write about because, as I said, I'd find different articles, I'd find different books that covered these subjects, and I'd say, oh, wow, that's really good. It's something that I want to include in the book because, again, it's really, really important. When I was looking at the tips on healthy eating, well, one of the things that I found was that there are several very good healthy eating lists, and I've listed about 3 of them. The best foods, for, the best greens and the best this and the best that. Well, what was important is that on these lists, some of the foods were duplicated. So out of the 3 lists that I've got in there, it's really good to see that it's good for keeping down blood pressure. It's good for, lowering cholesterol. It's good for maintaining weight. It's good because it has a lot of fiber. It has a lot of this. Again, when I looked at them, and I had to put the footnote in the book, you don't have to really stick to each and every list, but what's important is that so many of the things that you like are on each list. So recognizing that these are the foods, it could be 10 foods that you really want to incorporate into daily eating or weekly eating, as opposed to, I can't look at this list. I'm not going to eat everything on this list. And realistically, no one would. So those are some of the things that I found was important because we get so confused. There's so much information out here. The companies that are burgeoning with information on what seniors should do, what they should eat, where they should live, what they should buy, if they should downsize. It's just exploded exponentially, and unfortunately, it's confusing. So you really don't know where to turn, and there's just so much literature. What do I look at? So my job in writing this book was to pull snippets together, get you bits of information, and give a lot of resources at the back so that people can know I can look to, I can look at this agency for this. I can look for here, for there. And because the needs are great. The needs are great, particularly if you're caring for an ailing partner, or if you're a caregiver for ailing parents who are in their 80s and 90s.
There's so much to. I mean, your book is such a wealth of information. It covers so many topics, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. Because if we're talking about health, if we're talking about in regards to loneliness, I mean, you hit all of the topics, and you break it down in a way that makes it easy for people, just like you did with the health portion, because, it can get overwhelming. I mean, you've got reports all the time saying coffee's good to drink, coffee's not good to drink, chocolate's good to eat, chocolate's not good to eat. So, it gets really confusing out there, but you've broken it down in a way that makes it simple for people to go, okay, now this I can manage. I can do this,
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that's what's important, because I know, again, as a senior myself, having reached the age of 65, I was being inundated with information everywhere you look. There was, you stand in the grocery store line, and every, Good Housekeeping magazine has always got the big, somebody's got a big advertisement about the next best thing for someone who's about to retire to know. And you pick up the one, and then, the next week you come back and there's four more, and there's four more. And so it's interesting that, people will step back. That's what they will do. They will completely step back and not avail themselves of some of the vital information that they can. And so I thought it was important for me to put as much in this book as I could and give people a starting point. It is not the end, but it's a good starting point on so many issues. Talking about your health, talking about maintaining life balance, talking about life planning. Tip number 3 is meet your new body, because it's a different body than you knew as a 20-year-old. It's not the same body, so become acquainted with her. It's okay. It's okay. She needs to be treated differently. She needs to be become aware of different things. You become aware when you go to bend over and to pick up the toy from the grandbaby, and all of a sudden you got up a little too fast and you got a little pull in the back. And little simple things like that. But it's just important to recognize that we all make these changes. There's a boatload and boatloads of us going through these same changes together. And so what we can do is support each other and pass along the information. And so this I call a vital resource, because it's got so much information in here. I've got a fun place in here. It's called Hello Senior Discount.
Oh, yes.
And I said, now I had to include that, because we've got a discount on restaurants, retail, apparel. We've got grocery, travel, entertainment, cell phone discounts, simple things that we take for granted. But there are some, just a growing number of retailers out there that are dying to take your money. They're dying to take your money, and what they need to know is that they need to offer you a senior discount. And so many of them do. You can look in this book. You can go on AARP. They've got major listings. You can call a retailer before you get there to see if they have one. Or when you get there, if there's no sign, you ask the retailer. I guarantee you, if you ask them enough times, they will put a senior discount in place. Ross Dress for Less stores, Ross all across the country. In the U.S., they have Tuesdays is senior day. You get 20% off of anything every Tuesday. So there are stores and there are businesses out there, from rental car agencies and more, and hotels that will most definitely recognize your spending power and want you to come to them.
Yeah, they really do want to, have just really any community, but they really have focused also on the senior community to be able to come in and do shopping there. They're like, hey, we want
Absolutely. You guys. Right, big disposable incomes, and they want them to be spent at their establishments. And so that is their calling card. That is their welcoming card. And one of the last things I'd like to add as far as what I surveyed, and I've got tip 10 is about frauds and scams. And it's so very important for anyone at any age and any stage in life to recognize, but it is particularly important for those who've reached an age of 60 plus to recognize that they are being preyed upon by scammers and people who would want to defraud them from home repairs, online dating services, funeral frauds, the pension scams, Medicare scams. There are so many ways that they are defrauding seniors out of some of their hard-earned money, and many people live just on Social Security and a small pension. Many people live that way, and so it's important to know that. And many people who've seen this in the book already have told me that they're really thankful, and so they are actually helping themselves, and then others who are caring for their aging parents or relatives, they recognize that they have to be more involved in their finances, and everyone wants to keep their finances personal, in addition to an older person. But once they're sharing their financial purchases and things, then and a caregiver is more likely to be able to thwart a situation of fraud for them.
It's so important to have that extra help because there is so much going on nowadays. I mean, I work on computers. I do social media. There's stuff that comes across my desk all the time that I'm just like, really? That's a thing now? And so, I mean, and sometimes some of them, some of the scams are very difficult to determine if it's a scam or not.
Absolutely.
I'm having a tough time. Someone who's not using computers that much, it's got to be horrible, It
is. It's a whole new world, completely new world. And I remember before my mother died, she was learning to use computer, and she had used it at work, so she was accustomed to using that. But then when she's no longer working, then she's on, because once you're at your work establishment, you have that set computer that's just set up just to produce and interact with the clients. But when you're at home, when you have all these sites that you can go on, and Facebook and Twitter and so many other things, and then you don't realize what's coming in and the back doors that may be left open simply because you get an email that's all friendly and it calls you by name, and you think, wow, they must know me. And then you fall into the trap of succumbing to whatever it is, theft that they're trying. So, yeah, it's important. It's very, very important to do that.
What I hear a lot is they're saying, well, I'm on Facebook, and they're friends with a couple of my friends, so they must be okay. Like,
right.
Ooh, no, not necessarily.
Yes. Yes. I've heard the same thing, and you just don't know. And they'll say, oh, the Facebook's family, and again, when that puts it in a different category. I bristle when I hear someone saying, well, the Facebook family, this little family of friends that they have, like you said, who are some of their friends, and then their friends' friends, and then whomever else has jumped on that bandwagon that you have no idea what they're talking about. And people used to say, well, I'm going to be out of town this weekend, and they've forgotten that, 6 months ago they put their address because they took a picture in front of their house. And someone that's looking to scam you will look through your pictures, see that you've taken a picture, and with the numbers, right above your head, perhaps, and then you've mentioned that you live in a particular city, in an area. They will find a way. They will find a way, unfortunately. And it's the world that we live in, so you have to be super cautious about that kind of information going out.
Well, you know what? Knowledge is power. And that's why your book, Supercharge Your Life After 60, is such a huge resource. And, I think anyone who has a family member who is 60 or maybe 60, this is a great holiday gift because it gives so much information, a lot of insight, a lot of inspiration, for people to be able to kind of look forward to the next years that they have in life and what they're going to be doing next. Vicki, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
They can become part of my community. My website is Vicki Ward, VICKI, WARD.net. I am on Twitter at Seasoned Sister 2. I am on Facebook also as Vicki Ward and as Seasoned Sisters. And let's see, I think those are the main ways that I can be connected.
So I
can be reached in any of those ways.
Any of those ways. And do you do any speaking events or coaching?
I do. I have done speaking events to women's business groups, Seroptimist groups, to college students, high school students, always about empowerment in a particular area, talking through the titles of my books and some of the other subjects that I cover, mostly about women. So most of my talks have been before women, but I also do talks for parents of college-age students that are going off to college and those kinds of things. So it's a well-rounded schedule that keeps me busy and keeps me writing.
I'm sure. Well, especially as great a writer as you are, and I know you've had quite a few different accolades that have come your way as well, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you write next. And gosh, Vicki, you know what? Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today.
Well, Marianne, I thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun talking to you, talking about my book. I love to talk, but when I get a chance to, I do. But when I get a chance to share the information that's in my book with your readers, with your listeners, that just helps. It does a lot for me because I'm an independent publisher. And I publish all my books. I've published all my books through my own company. And so I have to do all of it. I do my own promotions. I do everything. I want to be wherever people want information. And so I love being put in that particular position. And so this newest book is doing just that. It's reaching people in senior centers. It's reaching people in churches that they've got. Everyone's got someone in a group that can learn from the messages that are in here. So I'm real proud of this book, and I welcome anyone to purchase, to call me or text me, getting information about whatever I have to offer.
Oh, well, I so appreciate this time we've been able to spend together today. And gosh, I hate to cut things, but we are at the end of our time. So we are going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Do you know that you can become a genius at any age? Do you know that you can change your life and create a brilliant life for yourself? Hi, I am Olympia LaPointe, an award-winning rocket scientist who you more than likely have seen on TED Talks, Impact Theory, and PBS. Check out my latest book, Answers Unleashed, The Science of Unleashing Your Brain's Power. Simply go to AnswersUnleashed.com books and check it out for yourself. You'll find the tools to help you create the life you've always wanted.
The highly acclaimed and newly released book, The Hand Part 2 by Lynn Van Prague Grattan, describes the journey between a psychic medium and a family who lost a son. Messages from Beyond Eternity's Gate is of love and healing. For more information, visit www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com. That's www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I am so delighted to be introducing our next guest, Dr. Armin Zadeh, and he's here today to talk to us about his new book, The Forgotten Art of Love. So, Dr. Armin is a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and he's authored more than 100 scientific articles. He's a regular speaker at national and international scientific meetings and directs educational events around the world. As a cardiologist and scientist, Dr. Armin experiences the relationship between the mind and the matter on a daily basis. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Armin.
Thank you, Marianne. It's great to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you. And, gosh, what a profound book you wrote. My goodness. Once I got my hands on this, I couldn't put it down.
Oh, thank you. Obviously, whenever you write something, you hope it will ring a bell, it will do something to people and trigger thought or so, and that's all what you can hope for. And if you get some feedback that it actually speaks to people, it's very nice. It's very gratifying. Thank you.
No, of course. And, so it leads me, obviously, to my first question for you. It's like, okay, so you're a cardiologist. So how, and a very highly noted one, by the way. And so how was it that you came about writing a book on love?
Well, good question. I get that a lot. But, like everybody else, I'm trying to make sense of this life. What is it all about? We have a few decades for most of us to live, and the question, and to me, and like to anybody else, is how do we use them best? And looking at human affairs, like many are, I'm saddened, by the fact that there's a lot of misery in the world, suffering, deception, and even destruction. And at the same time, I'm encouraged by the acts of kindness, thoughtfulness, and all that love that is also going around. And we sometimes seem to overlook, with a lot of bad things going on around us. And most people are encouraged by these things, and indeed, and almost everybody wants to live happily and peacefully, and almost everybody wants loving relationships, even those folks we may perceive as hostile. And I make the point in the book that human nature is actually closer aligned with love than with greed, and it's in our biology, it's inherent in us. So the big question is, if that's the case, and really everybody wants to live happily and have loving relationships, and the question is, why then do we so often fail? And is there something we can do to increase our success? And these were really the questions which were at the core for me writing this book. And it is no news to anybody, and at least it shouldn't, that the answer to happy living is love. And love is indeed the key to any life, the key to happiness, and it actually is also the key to better health. People who maintain a strong focus on keeping love in their lives live longer and better, as shown in a number of research studies. So here's a little bit where my medical background comes in. But the main motivation, I have to admit, for writing this book, it came less from being a physician, but more from me being a scientist. And that's actually, where I spend most of my time with science. And so I was intrigued by the questions to understand love better, and why does it play such a crucial role to us? Anybody would agree that it does, but why is it? Is it Is it because it's part of our biology? Is it part of spirituality? Is it both? So I wanted to explore the nature of love, really, what it really is. I want to get a better grasp on it and understand what makes us love somebody and what makes us not love somebody. And so my thought was that if we get to a better understanding of love, then maybe we will get better at keeping it in our lives. And the curious thing is that despite the indisputable importance of love, and everybody, again, agrees on that, is that we spend comparatively little time trying to understand it. We all have some concept of love, but we don't really, at least from what I hear, is most people don't really question that concept. And instead, we're spending most of our lives acquiring all kinds of skills and knowledge, which we believe helps us navigating this life. But trying to understand this thing, which again is at the center of it all. We're spending years in school studying languages, history, economics, and all these things. And in our spare time, we may dream about love and watch movies about love. But we do all kinds of other things, but trying to get really to the core of living. And so that these were these questions which really drove me and fascinated me. And the challenge is that love is multidimensional. I mean, there's no doubt, and it is difficult to grasp. And to try to understand love, it seems we need to view it from different angles, including biology, physiology, psychology, but also philosophy and spirituality. And here, finally, I get this, after a long-winding response, I get to your question. Here's a similarity to medicine. Medicine is not considered a science, actually is considered an art. And to understand somebody's pain, we not only to have knowledge of biology and chemistry and physics, physiology, and these things, but we also need understanding of psychology, philosophy, and spirituality, because they all shape our perceptions. And in a way, my skills of being a physician and a scientist may have helped exploring the nature of love.
Well, it sounds like you have a very unique view into the whole entire topic with being a physician and a scientist, that you are really kind of unpeeling it in a way that you kind of, with the science end, kind of breaking it down on what does it mean to love and what is that all about. And, and I'm sure as a doctor, you have a very unique point as well as far as view to be able to see how this affects people that you work with and people around you.
Yeah, and I think again the key thing is that as physicians we have to use all these fields to look at a problem, and I think that what really helps, because I think we don't do justice to love if we just look at it from one angle, and I think that we tend to do that. If I'm a person coming from a certain background, I tend to look at it from that angle. But again, then you don't do justice to a complex phenomenon, because there are so many other facets to it. And so I really tried to, it's a daunting task, but my main goal was to try to look at from many different angles with the hope that I maybe can contribute a little bit more comprehensive view on love compared to just one view. But yes, as a physician, we are kind of used to using these different views and specialties, and maybe that was helpful in this context.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd love for you, because you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd love for you to expand why you consider art to be love to be an art.
Well, I believe, and then I have to mention here, and folks who read Erich Fromm's classic, The Art of Loving, they will pick up on that. So the title refers to the forgotten art of love, and so I make reference here that Fromm, in his book The Art of Loving, made that claim. So this is not mine. That love is an art, and I think that Fromm was right. I think he identified a lot of characteristics about love which were novel and really profoundly changed the way we look at love. And some of these things, again, I think they have been they're forgotten right now because Fromm wrote this book in 1956, and not too many people remember that. And so one purpose of me writing this book was just to bring this back into our mind, because I think Fromm really had some very insightful thoughts there. So Fromm believed that it was a mistake, first of all, to confuse the intense feelings which we have in the beginning of a romantic relationship, and we call typically falling in love, to confuse this with actual love. So this obviously is very provocative, because many people would say, well, that's what love is. These intense, almost obsessive feelings in the beginning. And he said, no, that's not love. What this is a passionate phase, which again may be part of a romantic relationship, but this phase won't last. And I bring a lot of examples in the book, where we have now support for this view from science, that indeed these are different entities, meaning the initial very passionate phase and then the long-term love. So the point here is that if we think that love is just these really obsessive, overwhelming feelings in the beginning, we will be inevitably disappointed, because they again last only for 3 to 4 years, and if these very intense feelings subside, and then people believe that is love, then they will be disappointed that these feelings again are fading. And in fact, there's actually evidence that there's a peak in relationship breakup after 3 to 4 years because of this phenomenon and changes. So in contrast, Fromm, and I agree with him, felt that love is a lasting, a committed state, and in difference to the falling in love phase, which is a passive phase where the feeling comes over us. But actual love is actually an active, has a strong active component. So in my book, I define love as the urge and the continuous effort for the happiness and well-being of somebody, and which is supposed to express that love involves powerful feelings, undeniably powerful feelings, but also there's a critical component of commitment. And this active commitment aspect in the process of loving is actually the key to its success. But it is the one which is often neglected, probably because it takes effort. We all like to think that love is this phenomenon which is effortless, and it just we just have to enjoy it, and you have to be lucky to have it. But the inconvenient truth, at least I believe and Fromm believed, is that love is no exception to the rule that any other great achievement in life has to be worked for, has to be earned. So where does the art portion come in? Well, that exactly requires, this commitment portion requires dedication and skills. The skills mainly identifying what are the factors which are keeping our commitment, and developing methods to keep this commitment alive. And that's why I agree with Fromm that love indeed is an art, and which requires devotion to this art and skills.
Well, and what a great point to make, and observation as well, so that people, and when they pick up your book, The Forgotten Art of Love, they're able to really understand, for the most part, a really good scale of aspects of love. So it's not just you get into it for the first 3 to 5 years and everything's rosy, and then you wonder why you have to start working later. I mean, there's at least a level of expectation later on that there's going to be some work, and you have to work on it throughout the entirety of your relationship.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And many know that. Many people know intuitively in long-term relationships. They will tell you the same thing. You have to work on it. But I think the key is that we know that in this book, at least I try to explain why that is. Why is it that we have the trouble with keeping love in our lives, and what is it exactly what we have to do to maintain our commitment. So I hope that by explaining the actual mechanism there, that people can relate to it and maybe find it easier just to maintain their commitment.
You probably get this question all the time, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think some people are going, gosh, you know what? I never really feel like I get into that love space, and it's hard for me to fall in love. So is it easier for some people than others?
Well, it's there's definitely this it's easier for some people, and some people it's harder. But again, the distinction is the falling in love and the staying in love. The falling in love aspect, clearly, is something which is not much under our control. It is something, again, from nature, made by nature, just to jumpstart a relationship. And as far as we understand it, there are certain criteria our brain runs through whenever we see somebody, meet somebody, and that is subconscious. And when we are in the right context and under the right circumstances and with the right criteria, then a kind of switch goes on in our brain, and we have these overwhelming feeling for somebody. Now, it seems that these criteria also change, with life, and most of us feel like, we fell in love all the time when we were teenagers, and then later it was less common. To some extent, it seems like that these criteria evolve over time, and that's why we don't fall in love that commonly. Now, then the other aspect, though, is the long-term love aspect. And there, again, there's some evidence that there is differences. Like with everything else, there's some people have certain disposition and inclination for some things, and some others don't. But the good news is that there we have a lot more control over staying in that love space. A lot more control than we think, and I think that's one of the key aspects in this book, is just to show that indeed we have something to say about that. So sometimes we feel like this is just out of our control, and we just have to wait for the right person, etc., etc. But I'm trying to make the point in the book that it's often not so much the right person. A lot of this is ourselves, the way we look at things, how we look at other people, defining and determining how we feel, how much love we feel for other people. So it's really an empowering concept, and I feel that we can be much happier, we can be much more loving if we recognize how we get to that space. So it's often knowing how to get there. Now, again, some people may find easier to get there, and some people have a harder time. There are a lot of factors there, and an important one is where oneself is in life and how comfortable one is with himself or herself. So self-acceptance is a very important part in the act of loving, which sounds maybe counterintuitive, but it's a critical point.
No, it actually makes perfect sense, because if you're not happy with yourself, how can you be happy with anybody else around you? And it would be hard to act loving otherwise, Well, that's exactly right, and it is, but it's a very important point because it keeps many people from able to
be more loving, and because self-acceptance is so critical for our lives. But if we consciously or subconsciously are not accepting us or having certain conditions that we feel we need to be more successful, more important, more physically attractive, etc., then we will be driven quite a bit and distracted. Our mind will be constantly distracted to get affirmation from external sources, and that can be a major problem to opening ourselves to others. We always feel like we can multitask, but there's lots of evidence now that our brain is not very good in multitasking, and these factors are really very important in distracting our brain, that we constantly looking for affirmation somewhere else, and whereas the act of love requires us just to focus on others. But if you focus so much on ourselves, to maintaining ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to devote attention and love to others.
When you were doing all of your research for this book, was there something that you came across that kind of surprised you?
Well, there were a lot of factors which actually I find mostly confirming. As I have to say, to me, the most intriguing part of the research was that there were a lot of aspects which we always felt to be true, but we did not have the evidence. And then, but now there is evidence from science to support these aspects, such as the assumption that there's a difference between falling in love and long-term love, which is now shown by MRI studies of the brain and with the blood sample analysis of blood hormones to really conclusively shown that there is a distinct difference. I guess the thing which struck me the most was when I looked at more deeply into the biology in terms of where does it all come from? Where does the drive of love come from, and why is it so important to humans? And there the evidence points to survival benefits among humans in the history, and particularly Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest kind of doesn't seem to fit there, and that I found very interesting, because it seemed to be contradicting that point that we feel like mostly, evolution is mostly about the strongest survives, and how does love fit in here? But then there is actually fairly recent research about Darwin's theories in evolutionary theories in man, and he was there very, very specific about the fact that he believed that love is probably the reason why humans did so well, have been doing so well, because of the strong social bonds they form in protecting the offspring, etc. And that I found very fascinating, and because again the general perception is that evolution mostly is driven by the strongest, but in fact there's evidence from evolution that is more important to be loving than selfish, and I think that's what I kind of alluded to in the beginning, that there's evidence from biology that the drive to love is very strongly anchored in us and stronger than anything else.
For people that feel like they just aren't loving in nature, is that something that they can learn?
Yes. That's exactly the beautiful aspect of it. That it is much more under our control than we may think. And essentially, the concept is very, very simple. We kind of learn to be mindful of our thoughts and actions and what drives them. And that sounds fairly easy, but it's actually very difficult, because every minute of the day, what we do is driven by some motivation, obviously, and it could be very basic. We want to eat something, or we're thirsty, and we do something just to fulfill these needs. But then there are lots of others drives, which have a big influence on us, and they are often directed by self-serving impulses. Again, we want us to become more successful or become more wealthier, etc., etc. So these are a lot of influences on us, and to some extent, obviously, they also are self-sustaining. We need to earn a living to support ourselves, etc. So there are aspects, which are essential for our self-sustainment. But beyond that, there are a lot of influences on us which pull us in different directions, and in these directions, they often they pull us away from being loving and focusing on relationships. And that's really what it comes down to, that our trouble with relationships or love in general is a conflict, that we have lots of other interests as well. And most of these interests, though, are aiming at short-term gratification and that don't lead to lasting contentment. And even though we know that, there's lots of movies and books, etc., and showing that if you're the richest person in the world, it still doesn't mean we're happy. We're watching Christmas is coming up, A Wonderful Life, and we see that it only matters. The relationships, is that what matters? Love, is that what really matters? So everything else does not matter. But yet these lures are so strong that they are distracting us constantly. And any distraction takes us away from relationship and love. And basically the skill is to develop ways to be conscious, be mindful that that's what's going on in our mind and our brain, and then redirecting our attention to the things which really matter. That is relationships and love.
It almost seems that, to really get in a place where you can love fully, you almost need to get rid of some of the distractions that happen, Yes, and that's exactly right. It comes down to our priorities. But once we understand fully what's happening in our mind and how these distractions really have a detrimental effect on our happiness, then maybe we are more inclined to do that. And so a lot of this has to do with awareness and conscious living. And again, this is something which has been described quite a bit, but I think folks may not necessarily link that directly to love and to relationships, but in fact, these things are very closely linked. Well, and I'm actually going to kind of pivot a little bit, because in your book you talk about love and happiness, and they both are somewhat elusive for people sometimes. They're like, well, they can mean many things. And I loved how you broke that down and just had that discussion in regards to both of them, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Oh, sure. So happiness is again one of those things which are hard to describe. They seem to be a little elusive. But we know intuitively love is very closely related to happiness. When we feel love for somebody, we feel happy. And in general, if you kind of look at it at the molecular level, so to say, what is happiness? Well, happiness is when our brain is triggering certain hormones, certain happy hormones, and the brain does that in response to processing information on our environment, and specifically we perceive our situation such that it meets our expectations. Conversely, if it does not meet our expectations, we are restless, and to some level, this is unhappiness. So contentment relates, in fact, to the state of not desiring something. If we are completely happy and content, we don't want anything. We're just happy the way things are. And that kind of goes to what I said earlier, that conversely, we constantly want something. And that's why there's constantly a level of dissatisfaction. If our mind is always wanting or have something subconsciously where we want to be. Well, we want to be having a bigger house. We want to have vacation in the Bahamas, or we want to be more handsome or beautiful. And these things in our back of our mind lingering, and they cause a level of dissatisfaction. And whereas happiness is the state where we don't want anything, and that's why these things are so closely related to happiness and love. So how does love fit here exactly? Well, if you love somebody, if you're concerned with the well-being and happiness of somebody, you don't worry about your own desires. So it's the perfect state of selflessness, where our mind does not want us to chase after something for our good. So the result is an immediate feel of contentment, because our mind does not want anything. The only thing is we just want somebody else to be happy. And so that's why love is really closely related to that state of contentment, because we don't want anything for ourselves. But not only that, there's also, in the process of loving, our brain actually submits happy hormones in the process of loving. And we know that. When we look at somebody we love, this is warm, happy feeling. And this is something which is, as long as we truly focusing on love and on a love for somebody, will never go away. We always have that. We look at that person, we look at our children, there is this immediate feeling there. And again, this relating to the actual act of loving, but also to the fact that we don't want anything. In that particular moment, we're just happy to see the contentment of our loved one.
Yeah, the happiness that someone else is having. It really gets us out of ourselves then in being happy for other people.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the point, that we are not worrying about ourselves. And ironically, that's what really makes us happy. We're always striving to do a lot of things for ourselves, but the irony is that the less we want for ourselves, the happier we are. And the act of loving is that perfect spot, where we don't worry about ourselves and we are happy in looking out for somebody else.
Oh. Well, Dr. Armin, I thoroughly enjoyed your book, and I'm so glad we got to spend this time here today. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, thank you, Marianne. It's been great, and thank you for having me. And yes, if anybody is interested, my website is www.theforgottenartoflove.com. And please find me there and engage in some of the discussions, and you can see some excerpts of the book, and I'm on Facebook as well. So I'm always happy to hear from listeners and hear their perspectives.
Oh yeah, and then of course the holidays are right around the corner, so people can pick up your book it's a fabulous book to give as a gift. Dr. Armin, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. It's been great.
Well, that's the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.